Hi everyone, welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and today we have part 3 of our Celebration 6 retrospective. We are covering, once again, all of the events that most of us had seen during those 4 days, and today we are up to Saturday, the third day of the convention. Saturday is usually the busiest, craziest day because that's when most of the people are there. They do save some of the big events for Saturday, and reason being is because, like we mentioned before, Thursday and Friday, a lot of people are still either working or in school because some of those areas, kids had already had returned to school, so there weren't a lot of people who were able to take off, given the fact that the convention was later this year than it was the previous time. But in spite of that, there were still a lot of excellent, people there in terms of panels and guests. And the crowds were huge. There were really bigger crowds on a Saturday. Let's begin with what happened in the morning, which is the pre-show press conference that we attended. We were there with Steve, one of our geek founders, and we went to see the Chris Hardwick press conference. Chris Hardwick, as some of you might know, is the founder of Nerdist, the podcasts, the shows on YouTube, the comedy specials, all that stuff. That's Chris Hardwick's area, and he was there as one of the hosts of Celebration 6. While there, he was telling us about, his view of, how things are going as far as the convention and his work with Nerdist. And I managed to sneak in a question, which wasn't too difficult because just like the previous time, the press conference area wasn't that crowded. We only had about maybe 10, 15 people, and we were very close to our guest. He was only there for about 10, 15 minutes, keep in mind. But we were like only 15, 20 feet away from him, and he was answering just about everybody's question. And the question that I had asked him, which he responded, was about having to do with this whole boom of geek and nerdy related subject matter, not only on television, Big Bang Theory and all these other shows and conventions. Are we in the middle of a bubble right now that's about to burst? And all of a sudden, is geek culture going to just get flushed down the toilet and become unhip as it used to be for the majority of our lives? And his view was that no matter whether or not it continues to be popular or not, there's still enough out there to keep the whole thing going. In other words, people are still going to be as nerdy and geeky as they were, searching and spending the money that they used to do, trying to find whether it's your toys, your collections, your albums, posters, whatever it is that you're into. That will never change. It's just how the mass media, the general media, deals with it, whether or not they will be paying enough attention to it like they used to. So that was a quick little, almost like a warm-up to what we were doing on Saturday. So let's begin with Rancho Obi-Wan. We were able to go to Rancho Obi-Wan, which is a miniature version. From what I understand, from what Steve Sansweet said, it's 0.5% of his collection. 1/2 of 1/2%? So I guess that's 1/25 of 1%.
Wow.
Something like that. Anyway, Rancho Obi-Wan is what now is technically a museum where Steve Sansweet, who's the former head of fan relations for Star Wars company, this is the place that he's been building for years and collecting all his materials and all his souvenirs and all his toys and everything having to do with Star Wars for years. He's finally put it in a location that is now an open museum where people go and, you make a donation and you go view his exhibits and all that stuff he has. Well, he actually had it shipped from California to Florida, a portion of his collection. Now, some of us have seen this collection on books. He's put out a number of books all about his collections and stuff like that. He's done tons of articles and interviews and talks about them, but this is the first time you actually get to go and see it. I wish I could go to California and see the stuff because it seems to me like it's the type of thing where I could easily spend a couple of days just in there, which is impossible, obviously, but he did bring some pieces that were very memorable. Kim was also there at one point to look at that. What do you remember from that?
Well, if that's a microcosm of the collection he has got some bizarre stuff. I mean, because even in that little bit, one of the things that I recall that I found hysterical was some woman had crocheted a Salacious Crumb stuffed animal. I mean, I think he was practically like life-size too, which was hysterical. And there are all these, I found it odd that there was so much like embroidery and sewing of these things. There were a couple of mice that were Jedi, I believe. There was an embroidered Luke Skywalker Then the other thing that I really enjoyed seeing was the Norwegian outfit that the crew shot in.
Well, that's the thing about his collection is that he's not just a toy collector. He collects
No.
props, he collects official toys, prototypes, and he has a
Odd
huge
things
collection. That's the thing, fan-made stuff. He has a big collection of that. He was displaying a Tauntaun pinata that somebody built for him.
That was funny.
He has all kinds of weird stuff. Super hard to find toys, action figures. You know, the famous Vlix action figure that's impossible to find. He has it. Obviously, every toy you can think of. And
They even had Forlom's crotch.
yeah, they did. What he has is what Forlom of Empire Strikes Back, the robot's waist crotch piece is in his collection. So
Yes.
that's something a little unusual.
And of course, that's the thing our son picks up on, right?
Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
That was the highlight of my day.
But anyway, there's tons of stuff there. Hopefully, we'll be able to post some pictures of all the things we saw. And even as the convention was going on, I know that he was buying more stuff. And one of the pieces that actually he was going to bring home was the sand skiff that they built at the Diorama Workshop. That gigantic sand skiff they had is something they were saving for Steve because he actually bought it from them.
Did he? He bought it from them?
Yep.
Wow, that's cool.
Well, that was a little area that they set up for him, and it was one of the hardest to get to in terms of lines. The lines were pretty long, and they moved very slow because people were basically moving at the speed that they were looking at things. So when I got on it, there were only like 5 or 6 people in front of me, but it still took like 10, 15 minutes to get in there. And I know that when the line was going like around the block type of deal, it was a forget it. There's no point in getting on it because it was huge. And while there, I was able to pick up a couple of patches from his particular store and a hat. So that was kind of cool. Do you remember any other pieces that were memorable?
Well, you know, I always love seeing Yoda. His Yoda, was it an original Yoda?
I think it was a reproduction that was used for something other than the movies, but it was, from what I remember, I think they said it was cast from the Phantom Menace puppet.
Yeah.
The other thing I remember seeing was that he had the actual gun. Now, get this. It's a reproduction because obviously you're not going to use real guns, but it's an Uzi with a special telescope tip to it, reproduced, and it was used for, if anybody remembers, the prototype Boba Fett presentation that they did back in the early 80s when they were introducing Boba Fett, and it was Ben Burt, I believe, was like interviewing the guy who was playing Boba Fett, which hasn't been cast at the time. And they show him in complete white armor, and he has a cape, and the cape is really a towel, a Star Wars towel, but he's holding this huge gun. Well, he somehow got his hands on that actual gun that was used for the prototype presentation. So, you know, it's amazing the type of stuff he finds. It's just incredible. But let's move on a little bit now to the actual shows or presentations that we saw during Saturday. Now, Amanda and I, and later Kim, got to see something called Star Wars in 60 Minutes. And at first I wasn't sure what it was because I remember last time we were at Celebration, they had the one-man Star Wars show, which is one guy doing all the original trilogy films. This is a different group, and normally they would do, in 30 minutes, the original Star Wars films. And it's funny because the way they perform it is very fast, super fast, because you got to keep in mind that it's only about 10 minutes of film they cover, but they do it in a funny way with props that are very basic. Costumes are also very basic. Some of them play multiple roles, and it's just very funny the way they put it all together. This time around, they managed to bring together all 6 films into their presentation, and it was just hilarious, the things they were doing. It was for the whole family. It wasn't too adultish in terms of the humor. And people were just laughing their heads off. My daughter, who, it's hard to see if something's going to amuse her or not. She was laughing through the whole thing. What do you remember?
Oh, you know what I remember.
Well,
is it too much of a spoiler to tell? There's something about a guy, lounging on a table or on stairs, wherever he was, in his underwear. And, having his tongue hanging out of his mouth half the time. I mean, who else is he but, Jabba the Hutt? And it was hysterical. It was a fantastic rendition of him.
The whole crowd just loses it when you see it. Because again, it's so basic. There is no costume, really. So it's kind of like, what do we do for Jabba? Well, you take off your shirt, take off your pants, and stick your tongue out.
Yeah,
and
there we
the
go.
guy does
Slob.
that. Right, and he's like slobbering over Leia.
Yeah,
and people
he's got
are like
his-
screaming like, ah!
Yeah.
It's hilarious. They do this thing with the X-wing fighters. They use little chairs with lights on them, and they're like chasing each
Oh
other
yeah, they're like
around.
the school chairs you used to have. You hold them up, and you know the
they put little
the
flashlights
egg,
at the tips. They have like the Emperor's lightning. They use like noodles from a pool, wave them around. And the other funny thing I remember was when they were doing the Revenge of the Sith, the senatorial pods being thrown at Yoda. They're using floaties, circular floaties from pools being thrown at each other. That's how
Right.
they were throwing
Yeah,
those
and
things around.
R2D2 was like a little miniature garbage can.
Right, little garbage can. So it's, again, if you have a chance, see them if they come to your town. If not, go to YouTube, because I think some of their clips of their shows are all over YouTube. So that was hilarious. It was 60 minutes, so it was, it was longer than what it used to be in terms of, they're doing double the work because they're covering all of the films. And they even threw, I remember, in the middle, they throw a quick scene from the holiday special even as a bonus almost of what's going on. So that was kind of cute. And it's funny because later during the day, while we were covering the floor, we were just hanging out, looking at different things, they had a display that they usually bring them to celebrations and sometimes to Comic-Cons, which is a large action figure size display where you can go behind the plexiglass and stand as if you're an action figure in a Hasbro box.
Yeah.
Well, those guys showed up. They were going through the floor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And a
That
couple
was
of them,
fun.
and they were in costume. Those guys just came off of a performance. So they were just lining up, waiting to take their pictures. So I took a couple of pictures of them having their pictures taken by their own friends in full costumes inside a card back of a giant Darth Vader card back. So that was kind of weird, too.
Yeah. I took another writing seminar that day with Timothy Zahn, the author of Heir to the Empire and that trilogy. That was a pretty good one, too. A lot of people hold Timothy Zahn in high regard. Personally, he's not one of my favorite Star Wars writers, but, there was still stuff to learn. And again, like I mentioned the other day, it's interesting to see the perspectives from different writers, even different writers that are writing from the same universe, or EU or whatever. They're all writing Star Wars, but they all go about it in such different ways.
Well, one of the other display areas, which is actually near the Rancho Obi-Wan section, was the Make-A-Wish Boba Fett helmet display that they had. They've done these in the past, and that is they take a whole bunch of like effects or master replica type helmets, high-end helmets, and they give it to certain artists or celebrities or whatever, and they color them and paint them and make, reconfigure them in different ways, and then they auction them off at the end of the day or days after the convention. And this particular year, they were doing Boba Fett. I remember at one year they did Stormtroopers, another year they did Darth Vader, which is the one we saw last time. This year was Boba Fett. Which do you guys remember that were kind of memorable?
The one was there a squirrel? It was like a nest, like a squirrel's nest. There's like a tree coming out of a destroyed stormtrooper head, and there's like some kind of rodent squirrelish thing at the top, and one disappearing inside one of the holes.
I got to see they had a Boba Fett helmet. It was Prometheus Fett. It was basically like the Prometheus helmet mixed with the Boba Fett helmet, and it had like the virus thing in there and the crazy mouth.
There was a whole bunch of them that a lot of people had done, and I guess it's because of the nature of the shape of the helmet. A lot of people did like Roman gladiator or Dark Ages type of helmets, like gladiatorial helmets, because again, the Boba Fett style, you can, if you cut him in a certain way, it gives you that Roman type of fit on the helmet. There were some really elaborate ones with like gigantic spiders and stuff like that. How about you, Mike?
There's another one from Total Recall. They had the helmet splitting, and you got Schwarzenegger's head in between, so that was pretty cool.
I remember they also had what looked to me like a THX helmet. It had the cop helmet over the Boba Fett from the movie THX 1138.
Another one I really liked was when they turned one into a Cylon helmet from Battlestar Galactica. I thought that was pretty cool, with the red light going.
Yeah, some of these are very elaborate.
Yeah, they even had for comic book fans, an Iron Man style helmet. That was pretty cool. And again, just, so many different ones.
Yeah, and like I said before, they do this every time. I'm not sure what they're going to go for next time, but I do believe that all the money that's raised goes to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So at least it's a charity event that people eventually bid. Steven Sansweet had on display at Rancho Obi-Wan one of the Vader ones from the previous convention, so I'm sure you're going to see one of these helmets show up in his facility pretty soon. How about you, Cal? What do you remember from Saturday?
Well, on Saturday was actually like one of the biggest highlights of my years in going to conventions. So I went to a Clone Wars panel, which was the day after the premiere, Dave Filoni was there, Joel Aaron was there. Joel Aaron's the effects supervisor.
And normally, what do they do on these?
They just like show some clips and talk about new stuff that they're gonna do and the future. And then like in the last like 10 minutes, all of a sudden George Lucas comes up on stage and everyone's freaking out for like 2 minutes straight. Everyone's just like clapping and screaming. And then finally Lucas says like a paragraph and then he leaves and then everyone's like screaming again for the next like 5 minutes.
Well, what was he talking about?
He was just saying like how great Dave Filoni is and all that, and how the Clone Wars has gotten so far from where it was before, and how he's very excited about the new Detours show that's coming out, which was from the super secret Star Wars panel that we didn't get to go to. But
And he also showed up for that one.
Yeah, he showed up for that one too on the same day, but we didn't get to see it.
There were 10 of us, as a group, basically, there were 10 of us there, and Kyle, you were the only one to actually see George Lucas.
Yes, I'm a very happy boy.
We were so jealous.
Yes, everyone was jealous.
Now, what was the other panel you went to see?
Later that day, I went like an hour early to go to the Calling All Kids thing because first I thought they might be showing the season 5 premiere again, or they would be having George Lucas come since George Lucas was there. I'm like, ooh, I want to see George Lucas. Maybe he'll say hi to everybody and high-five everybody or something. So I went there. I got an hour early. Dad gave me lunch, and then I went on. Dave Filoni was there, and he's like, hey, kids, this is a special kiddie thing for you guys since the Clone Wars is getting all dark and stuff, and these episodes are for you, and you guys are going to be the only people that's going to see it for a while, so keep this in mind.
What did they play?
Well, they played, I forget if it was 4 or 5 episodes, but they played like these 5 episodes of the Clone Wars. I'm not sure if they're going to be in this season or next season or something, but it was like, it wasn't called the Clone Wars, it was called like the Young Jedi. It takes place during the Clone Wars, but it was like instead of the yellow Clone Wars banner, it showed like a green Tales of the Young Jedi banner thing.
This is the same type of animation that we see on Clone Wars?
Yeah, then maybe it's going to be the start of a new show, I don't know.
Did you see any characters that we already know, or they're all new characters?
Well, they had Ahsoka, they had Yoda, they had Obi-Wan, they had Grievous, they had Hondo, they had Cody.
And they were in episode chunks, like a show, like in little 22-minute chunks?
Well, they showed it all as one episode, but he said it's like a 5-part arc that you just saw right after that. But I'm not sure if I just saw basically a fourth of season 5 or
some bonus
or just
material.
like a bonus material thing. Maybe it's going to be one of those things they're going to put straight to DVD. Maybe it's a new show because George Lucas is saying he's trying to develop some more kids shows. Like maybe they're going to do that after the Clone Wars or something.
I guess we'll find out if after we watch next season. Maybe they'll show up as part of the 22 episode run. Who knows?
Yeah, there was a Wookiee Padawan. There was like a Rhodian Padawan. There was a Hammerhead Padawan.
And you know what that means? More action figures. More characters equals more action figures.
There was a lot of action figures. There's a circus.
Well, the other panel that we got to see also was, and I think, Kyle, you might have been there for that, is the 3D panel. Now, what they did is they broke these down into, I think, 3 or 4 different presentations, and it was called like the future of Star Wars in 3D. And basically what they're doing is they're previewing the next 3D film, which is Attack of the Clones. And they have a couple of the visual effects guys, including Dennis Muren, I think, was there. And he talks about, the 3D process and how, they have to convert these films, how it's done, how difficult it is. And at the end of the panel, what they do is they show us a trailer, more or less, of Attack of the Clones, which it's not so much a trailer, meaning the type of trailer you're going to end up seeing on TV, but it's more of a compilation of scenes from the film that demonstrates the use of 3D. And what we saw was incredible. You got to keep in mind that the prequel films were shot initially with film, and then by the time you get to the second film, it was a combination of film and HD. And by the time you get to the third film, it's all HD. HD cameras being used. So the technology gets better and better as you progress in these films, and the scenes they showed us were fantastic. You have Coruscant, the chase between the 2 speeders in Coruscant. You have some of the ending sequences of the army getting ready. Dooku fighting Yoda. My God, it was just unbelievable. I can't wait to see the film. And I'm glad that they're sticking to the same formula they did with Phantom Menace, and that is they're not overwhelming you with the 3D. The 3D is kind of subtle. It doesn't turn into a Viewmaster presentation. It's subtle enough to give it depth and to make it different. You're looking at this thing in a different way that you haven't seen before. So that was one of those 3D presentations. And what was cool is that they gave everybody 3D glasses, especially for Celebration 6. So everybody got to keep their
they were like black and green.
Yeah, their commemorative green Celebration 6 glasses. So another cool little thing to keep. All right, what other thing did you guys see?
Me and Mike and Kyle apparently were the only cool people in our group, we went to the Mixer. It was at the convention center around 9 till midnight.
Yeah, it was
and it
cool.
was just for fans. There was a great DJ there. The DJ just really knew how to keep the crowd hopping, and they were. I kind of wish I had people with me that would have danced more, but there's something about being in this huge room with, the lights down low and, you have the dance floor lights on, and then there's just people with lightsabers in the air all over. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, on our way there, we were going through the hall, and we ran into James Arnold Taylor, who was the main host, and he was the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Plo Koon on the Clone Wars. And I got to take a picture with him, and we talked a little bit about the show, because I missed it, and did a few impersonations, and then we went to the Mixer. And at the Mixer, there was a few other kids there, and we fought like this guy dressed up as Darth Maul, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and we got free Pringles.
Free Pringles!
Yes, it was sponsored by Pringles. So anybody who walked in, you got your free choice of a can of
And
Pringles.
the guy was like, "That's the Pringles, man. You like your Pringles, man."
Yeah, the only thing is you weren't quite sure what to do with your bottle of Pringles if you wanted to dance, so you're kind of like carrying this can of Pringles around. Although in retrospect, they might have made good maracas, huh?
The other cool thing was, it's because it's Saturday night. Like I said, anybody that was at the convention and you had your pass, you were able to go in. It was a way to unwind a little bit, relax, party. You also had food, and they had an open bar. Not an open bar, but you had to pay for your drinks. And the big dance floor. And it's just a way just to socialize, relax, and then start all over again the next morning.
And by the way, if at the next celebration at the Mixer, if anybody is really into dancing and would like somebody else to dance with, I'll be available, since my husband couldn't even go to the Mixer.
Count me out.
Ditto. Well, we also had that date, and we also were not able to make it because, again, we were running all over the place. Usually, we have a group of, like you said, 10 people, and we're going in like 4 different directions. Everybody's like jumping from one to the other and meeting each other halfway. But there was also the Ian McDermott panel, which was another big event that we couldn't make it. But again, a lot of these things, again, if you're interested, they're online. A lot of people posted all this stuff online. Officially, unofficially, you'll find a lot of these things. So Saturday was another exhausting day. Well, that brings an end to our Saturday running around Celebration 6. I'd like to thank Kyle, Kim, and Mike for joining me today, reminiscing about that day, and hopefully we'll see you here next time when we continue going over our Celebration 6 trip. Please join us again next time when we continue this here on Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye.
Stop.